our first session in our series of roundtable conversations this morning. Session number 1, product development and sustainable tourism. I am going to hand over to the moderator, Ms. Lorraine Charles St. Jules. Lorraine? There she is. It is my pleasure to hand over to Lorraine, who is going to host you for the next hour and a half. Thank you once again, everyone, and welcome. Enjoy.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Lorraine Charles St. Jules. I'm a 1994 graduate from St. Lucia. I currently reside in New Jersey. I run a boutique tourism marketing and development company specializing in destination marketing, hotel brands marketing, small luxury resort marketing, training, and education. My present and past clients are in St. Lucia, Grenada, St. Kitts, Anguilla, and in the US, Connecticut, New York, and New Jersey. Welcome to the CHTM Reunion Roundtable Conversations. This session's topic this morning is product development and sustainable tourism. I was really encouraged by Chancellor when he encouraged us to consider cooperation and collaboration for the future and consider the opportunities we have available in tourism. Sustainable tourism and product development is so critical to the future of tourism in the Caribbean. And as we all know here, the monkey in the room, COVID-19, has affected us all. And the Chancellor also mentioned that both Barbados and many of the Caribbean islands are experiencing dramatic declines in tourism. Today, guys, we have a fantastic lineup of experts joining us this morning. Incidentally, the last major in-person conference on sustainable tourism was held in St. Vincent in 2019. But guess what? It was delayed by weather. And there was a tropical storm coming into St. Vincent, so it was delayed. But it was then discovered that sustainable tourism was more than weather. It was about the people. The Prime Minister of St. Vincent then, who was the host, challenged the audience with the following as barriers or challenges affecting sustainable tourism: climate change, resource scarcity, fresh water, the aging of society, growing inequality, artificial intelligence, capital, and unilateralism. Our panelists, I'm sure, are quite intimately familiar with those challenges proposed by Prime Minister Gonzalez. So first, I would like to start off the conversation this morning with Benny Watson. Benny Watson is our first speaker. Benny is a career hospitality and tourism educator. She currently lectures at the University of the West Indies, Mona, a graduate of 1998. She has over 20 years teaching experience at the tertiary level. Most recently, Benny was a lecturer at the University of Technology in Jamaica, where she had responsibility for tourism management, events management, and research. She also served as the Hospitality and Tourism SHTM's external liaison at the JHTA, Ministry of Tourism, and numerous other industry bodies. She's currently a member of the Ministry of Tourism Community Tourism Policy Coordinating Committee. Prior to UTech Jamaica, she joined her role as Program Coordinator for Entertainment and Events Management Program at the Heart Trust, NTA VTDT. Her savvy management skills quickly led her to being assigned further direct responsibility for the specialist programs of business, fashion design, food preparation, and electrical specializations. This was preceded by 4 years at the Excelsior Community College, where she also served as acting head of the Tourism and Hotel Entertainment Management Department. Besides her experience as an educator, Benny's professional career spans customer service roles in the airline industry, as well as 2 separate stints as a hotel general manager. She's also worked as a freelance researcher and speechwriter for several government bodies. A sincere tourism enthusiast, Benny believes the world is a classroom. As such, she has traveled extensively across the Caribbean, South Asia, Europe, and North America. Between 2002 and 2005, she was a participant at Japan Cultural Exchange Program, where she taught English as a foreign language at secondary and tertiary levels. Her passion for languages allows her to babble in Spanish, German, and Japanese. Incidentally, her name is German. Despite her busy schedule, the mother of one remains actively engaged at the community level. She is the immediate past president of her Citizens Association and has worked tirelessly in several social and community-based organizations. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me virtually with a nice virtual hug in welcoming Benny. Welcome, Benny.
Thank you so much, Lorraine. That was such an out-of-body experience. It didn't sound like you were introducing me at all, but thank you. Good morning, colleagues, friends, family members, many of you are. This morning, I wanted to take us on a little trek by looking at the notion of resilience-proofing Caribbean tourism, the next normal. Keith, may I have an opportunity to share my screen, please? I just have a couple slides I wanted to go through, but in so doing, I simultaneously wanted us to take a step back and to look at how we got here, why it is we're even having this discussion with the level of passion and vigor I'm anticipating this morning. So how we got here in setting the stage, I think I want to...
Benny, you could go ahead and share your screen.
All right, thank you so much.
Yep.
All right, and I'll just reduce this as well. All right, so in walking through the next normal, where I really wanted us to start is on setting the stage, what 2020, March 2020 meant for all of us. And it will vary dependent on the lens that we're wearing. For some of us, March 2020 was the beginning of the end of Caribbean tourism, as we have all grown used to it. And I think that was re-emphasized by the Chancellor this morning. For others of us, and that includes me for sure, it is the beginning of a brand new form of tourism. So bleak as the recovery process may seem, given the unending search for a vaccine, I'm going to go out on a limb and suggest that the corona pandemic may have been a blessing in disguise for regional tourism. And I know it's a little difficult for some of us to accept, given that 2019 was indeed a record-breaking year, nearly 33.1 million visitors, and also, again, demonstrating a consistent uptick of roughly 2% per annum, consistently over a 6 to 7 year period. So we have really been growing and seen an increase in numbers. Up to December 2019, we know our dependency level was such that up to 2.8 million Caribbean nationals would have been directly or indirectly dependent on the tourism industry. We have also seen relative improvements in visitor expenditure, but I depart here by reminding us of Butler's life model cycle, which suggested that a rise always comes before a massive fall. So as we boast the numbers, I wonder how many of us took the time to truly interrogate the figures, and in so doing, to have an appreciation of who our visitors were, where they were coming from, the extent to which we continue to cater to old markets as opposed to looking at new segments, and therefore the attractiveness of our destination region to emerging markets. It's commonly accepted that whilst we're those experiencing the highest levels of fatality from this pandemic are some of those in the very source markets upon which we have become dependent, at least for almost 85% of our arrivals. Missing from the analysis, however, is the open secret that our islands remain a paradise for more mature audiences who continue to look for rest and relaxation. It is therefore at this stage important for us and for our hoteliers in particular to appreciate that the visitors most likely to return, not just in the first phase, but on a sustained basis, are more than likely going to be among younger people who are less fearful of contracting not just corona, but other viruses as well. And it's a crucial point for us to make as early as now, because we have this erroneous notion of Caribbean tourism being synonymous with the hotel industry. And in Jamaica, it's particularly problematic because it's the hotel industry that now becomes synonymous with the all-inclusive sector. So we are at the point where we also have to examine how much our visitors are spending and in what, and on what rather. And as we do so again, we become cognizant of the reality that package tours, which makes up about 80% of travelers' expenditures to include airlines, hotels, and other experiences, the money really does not make it to our shore. And so some of the rough estimates of leakage are relatively high across the region, averaging between 40 and 80%, 85% in the case of the Bahamas, we have heard. So there's quite a lot we have to look at in terms of how we resilience-proof our sector by ensuring that we identify products that minimize the degree of leakages that we are now experiencing. And I'd like to go further, coming out of a discussion we were having last evening, where we're looking even at leakages being built into the nature of the product via the import bill that's associated with it, the profit repatriation based on the very nature of the ownership structure in the industry, and the high earnings by expats who then repatriate most of this to their home countries. This forces us once more to look at how we can resilience-proof by shifting away from our traditional idea of what tourism is and moving into a new era of change that this morning I'm challenging all of us as hospitality and tourism experts to really emancipate ourselves to the point where we're able to really ask the serious questions of what is happening and what people are looking for. So I've asked a string of rhetorical questions and I've posed them deliberately, but I'm also posing them against the backdrop that the corona pandemic literally offered us an opportunity to pause and reset. And we are pausing and resetting to develop a product that becomes more sustainable, because we now have to focus on how we prioritize visitor experiences over visitor arrivals, as in numbers. How we prioritize the diversity of our product offerings that see us getting into our communities, getting into our way of life, getting into our culture and our heritage, and celebrating the resilience of us as a people, as opposed to remaining tied to a market that is aging. And for those of you who are over 50, over 60, no insultment here, but I like to remind us that the boomers, they're aging, they're dying. The millennials, the younger travel markets, they're growing, they're rising, and we simply are not attracting them in the sufficient numbers that's going to continue to make us remain one of the world's most tourism dependent region. I also want us to remind us that if we don't address the product challenges, we're going to head towards the tourism graveyard in much the same way that Acapulco did. Most of us on here today can relate to that, as well as Cancun had already started doing. So my theory, which we won't have sufficient time to explore this morning, is that we're shifting steadily towards a pace of gradual decline in product attractiveness, because we have not been able to attract viable new and emerging markets from generating countries. That is, we have emerging generating countries out of Eastern Europe, Southeast Asia, Asia on the whole, South America, Central America, even within the Caribbean itself, that we have not been prioritizing these because we have become vanguards of a traditional product that is aging despite what the numbers would suggest. What am I therefore suggesting that we do? I'm suggesting that we use a timeout, however extended it is, to really rethink, reformulate, and reframe a tourism product that is beyond sea. And a tourism product that is beyond sea, sun and sand, really requires us to take our heads from out of the sand and to focus really on who it is we are as a people. So as we reset the button, some of the things that we want to do for sure is to look at our cultural products, look at how we can improve community wellness by ensuring that we're not using the traditional metrics of tourism, traditional metrics that forces us once more to look at numbers rather than the value from tourism and the value we have to be able to calculate in terms of the cultural and economic benefits. And the minute we start doing that, we're gonna find that to a great extent, we have a ready product. What we have not figured out how to do is how to package that ready product in the same way we have packaged our hotel product. We have a ready product of culture. And I like to look at destinations like Macau, how small Macau is as a destination area, and yet still how excellently it has been able to build out on its tradition, its past. I know in the Caribbean, we still seem to have a lot of unresolved issues relating to our tradition of slavery and plantation life, etc. Except we do not recognize that within all of this, if we only just started demonstrating the sort of pride that came from the resilience that we demonstrated from that period through to now, then we would have a ready-made product that the rest of the world has an amazing interest in. And that amazing interest isn't just in the gastronomy, the food that we now need to offer, and how we repackage some of it so that it's far more attractive, how we can develop and build out our gastronomy tourism and our food tours, how we can develop and build out our historic tourism and our communities, how we can shift away from our shorelines. So we look at eco and nature and other niche type tourism, not as special interest, but as tourism that we can engage in high volume earnings from. I think to a large extent, we have really been focusing on the wrong things. And not just the wrong things, but we need to figure out now how to have a parallel sort structure going along. So we have and we require the critical mass that we have from the traditional tourism product, but we also know that there is a growing trend, and I'm gonna stop right here. There is a growing trend for us to focus not on the bush, but on the experiences in our hills or geographic terrain that is just absolutely amazing, to focus on us as a people so that we can start growing regional tourism as a product and a staycation. Now, we don't have enough time to get into how we'll do all of this, but at some point we can further extend this conversation. And so I like to say, let's look back at who we are. Let's redefine our resilience. Let's appreciate that within this resilience is a whole host of products that we have not begun to package just yet. And again, our entertainment and event sector is another one of those. So we'll discuss these further on. Thank you.
Thank you, Benny. And what a great opening, what a great platform we can start on this morning. Redeveloping to shift alternative products, community engagement, culture, entertainment, technical matrix, traditional matrix. I think you gave us such excellent food for thought to start off our conversation this morning. So let's move on to our second speaker. He is, and he requires no formal introduction for us graduates. He used to be our dear host. If you went to the Bahamas and had not met Rod, then something went wrong with you guys. So it's my pleasure right now to introduce our honorary CHTM CHCMite. Eric Rod Carey. He has been the Director of Parks and Science of the Bahamas National Trust, Parks Partnership Project Coordinator, Bahamas National Trust, the Nature Conservancy and Wildlife Conservation Officer, the Bahamas Ministry of Agriculture. He's also former Chairman, National Wetlands Committee of the Bahamas and U.S. Department of Interior appointment, the Kirtland's Wobbler Recovery Team. He holds an associate's degree in biology and chemistry from the College of the Bahamas and is a UWI graduate with a BS in zoology and botany. His degrees are supported by extensive training in wildlife conservation and nonprofit management. He has represented the Bahamas at many international and regional meetings and is active in international marine conservation, having presented at various conferences throughout the Caribbean, Europe, and the United States, including at the United Nations headquarters in New York. Over his years from the Bahamas National Trust, he transformed it from a small 10-person organization into fully functional trust with over 75 employees, and saw the expansion of operations to 3 additional island locations. He engineered key operational improvements, including the Exuma Keys Sea Park, resulting in the park being awarded a Platinum Blue Park Award in 2018. Eric was operational in the improvement of other key Bahamian national parks, including the Leon Levy Native Plant Preserve in the Eleuthera, Retreat National Park, and Perennial Forest National Park, New Providence, and the Andros Blue Holes National Park. He led a strategy to redefine the BNT brand, resulting in the BNT being recognized as the leading environmental organization in the Bahamas and one of the most successful in the Caribbean. He is a co-author of peer-reviewed publications on the Kirtlands, Wobbler, and on plant conservation in the Bahamas. Please help me welcome our dearest Rod.
Okay, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. I'm really excited to be able to share with so many of my friends and colleagues this incredible opportunity. I'd like to extend my thanks also to the leaders of this initiative and putting this reunion together. Of course, we would have loved to have been here enjoying count salad and boiled fish in the Bahamas, but it was not to be. But I think if last night was any indication, I think we will have quality experiences today through these virtual roundtables. And so I'll get right into what I'm talking about with respect to my title is Tourism and Environment. You know, are they friends or foes? And we often look at these as diametrically opposed to each other, on opposite ends of a spectrum. Often in my career here in the Bahamas and globally, we find ourselves as environmentalists being viewed as anti-development. And so the natural inclination is for people to think that the environment and tourism are opposite ends of the spectrum. Trying to advance my slides here. 1 second. Yeah, there you go. But I'd like to I'd like to put it into perspective as to who I am. Indeed, I am a graduate of the UWI, a very proud graduate. And when I came home from Mona in Jamaica, I went to the campus because I had friends who would have come from Jamaica, and I met with people like Keith and Jeff that I knew from Jamaica, and I started a bond that lasted for many, many years. First taking you everywhere, including this incredible photo Ishwar provided when we did that wonderful Eleuthera. Much of what we did there will never be repeated, but it was an incredible long-term relationship that started with me being friends with so many of you and eventually becoming myself a foster parent to people like Chanel and Craig and another Craig. So I've had a long association with CHTM that I'm very proud of. Just to tell you very briefly about the Bahamas National Trust, I can guarantee that many of you who were here in the early days would probably not have known about the Bahamas National Trust. I didn't know much about it, honestly, until I started working in the public service. But we're the national park managers of the Bahamas, fairly unique in that we are a non-profit organization, but we're established by the government as a non-profit organization. We're membership-based. We are the environmental guardians of the Bahamas. We are advisors to government, and we are advocates for conservation action and environmental protection. This is who we are. When I became executive director, probably about 15 years ago, we probably had a staff of 10 on several islands, and we've worked really hard with the support of my board and my colleagues, and with the support of the government, including, I see the former Minister of Tourism, Vincent, is here, and certainly people like him provided support for the organization to get where we are today, to reach the milestones that we have. Tourism is indeed, as you all know, I mean, you know what it is. It's all about the experience, and it's really, you know, we're talking here about product. You're talking about service. We learned all about that. And just as a little aside, I did start very briefly. I was a student briefly at CHTM, and I was doing a diploma in hotel and tourism management, but I was not able to complete that because of competing challenges with my work. But also in this slide, the environment is very much intertwined with what the experience of tourism is. You know, sometimes we like to think of the environment as a nature, indeed, as a little niche thing that's a part of the tourism product, especially in the Caribbean. I'm not a proponent of that. I think the environment is actually, it underpins everything about tourism in the world, and certainly in the Caribbean. And so the environment is indeed a key component of tourism. This is a slide here on the left of the beautiful waters of the Exuma Keys Land and Sea Park, the oldest land and sea park in the world. And here we have folks kayaking in the Lucayan National Park in Grand Bahama. The threats to the environment in climate change, habitat destruction, and that's where we sometimes find some of the issues relating to tourism development. Of course, large-scale development comes with a price for the environment. You have to take out mangroves, and often if you're putting in coastal developments, if you're putting in marinas, you know, large hotels require large landscapes, large plots of land. So there's habitat destruction that takes place. So there's definitely an impact that we can't get away from tourism. Over harvesting and consumption, again, you know, for our country as an example, where we have millions of tourists that come every year, we have to provide a lot of food from the environment, especially from the marine environment. And that, of course, is another impact that tourism has. And it is indeed a threat to the sustainability of the environment. Pollution, obviously, is a problem throughout the world. Here in the Bahamas, you know, we're doing things like banning plastics and styrofoams, as has been done in so many of our countries in the Caribbean, and we've actually modeled some of what we've done after some of what you've done in some of the other countries. And invasive species, marine and terrestrial. Marine invasive species like the invasive lionfish, we have invasive iguanas, which the Trinis would obviously wipe out in a minute because they love iguanas so much. But the threats to the environment are real, and we have to find ways of managing them. Climate change is absolutely the #1 threat, certainly to the Bahamas. The Bahamas is the most vulnerable country in the Caribbean and one of the most vulnerable in the world to one of the most serious threats that climate change poses, which is sea level rise. We could lose so much of the Bahamas that you guys got to see and enjoy when you were here, and we could lose so much of what is important because of climate change and these extreme weather events, and and the direct loss of tourism assets and livelihood. So climate change, a very, very serious threat that we have to keep advocating for, all of us, with our decision makers. If we have the opportunity to speak with people internationally, we have to keep advocating for action on climate change. Overharvesting of species. Conch, that so many of you enjoyed conch salad when you were here. Conch is now in trouble. We've been doing a lot of work with a conservation campaign to try and save this species, to make sure that it's around in perpetuity so that we can keep conch in conch salad. And some of the other things we spoke about here, pollution, lionfish, etc. The Sustainable Development Goals of the UN, so many of them interface with and interact with in tourism. They're all here representative, and these goals are basically a blueprint to guide how we as a planet and as a system can try and work with what nature has provided us to carry on our ways of life, to do business, etc. The opportunities, for developers to be good corporate citizens is demonstrated really well here in the Bahamas, and of course, Sandals, who is here throughout the Caribbean. We work closely with any number of major and small developers to provide support for our work. So as part of mitigation, as part of their corporate responsibility, any of these organizations here listed here, and those that you have in your country should be supported, should be encouraged to support the environmental movement, and what we can do to reduce the threat and to reduce the conflict between tourism and the environment is to look at things like sustainable building practices, climate smart design, good corporate citizenship, locally sourced goods, smaller products and hotels and businesses offer the opportunity for local ownership. And this is really important because those local owners, even in adversity, as we've proven here in the Bahamas, a lot of them, stick with the staff and stick with the business, even when it becomes problematic. But bigger is not necessarily better, but we've been able to do big tourism here in the Bahamas, whether it's at the Atlantis or Bahama, and we've been able to, those of us that work in the sphere, in the environmental sphere, we've been able to work with these large developers as well to be able to ensure that their developments are still within acceptable levels with respect to impact on the environment. I know we have a lot of exciting speakers lined up. I wanted to stick to my 10 minutes. Again, thank you all for joining. I wish you could all be here. And we got to get more of these reunions going, whether it's here in Jamaica, Trinidad, St. Lucia, wherever, because we are such an incredible people. And I want to certainly embrace what the Chancellor said about how important it is for us as alumni to support this organization that gave us such an important part of our future and our existence. So thank you all very much. It's been a distinct pleasure.
Thank you so much, Rod. That was excellent. And I wanted to start out to say your first slide, I saw you had some notorious individuals on that slide. And you mentioned about habitat destruction. So I hope everything still remains intact 25 years later, because I know what we did. I know how we, when we went to the outer islands, we agreed today that some things are going to remain nameless. So, but I wanted to just say that, yes, as we all went to the Bahamas, I noticed you also said about big was not always better. So most of us, I'm going to go for the small island side this time. You know, there were many of us who came from smaller islands and we had not been to the Bahamas before. So Bahamas was always a model destination for many of us. So I picked up on some key issues that you mentioned, which I think applies to all destinations represented today. Overharvesting, that affects whether you are large or small. And definitely you mentioned that climate change was the #1 threat for the Bahamas. And I think we all agree that this challenges all of us, especially some of the smaller islands in the Caribbean. We are saddened to learn that you have to do some conch management, because I think last night in one of the groups, we were talking about crack conch, how much we miss crack conch. So, and we are very perturbed about this actually. So as we proceed later on in our discussions, you spoke also about sustainable building practices and your local ownership of those small companies. So much food for thought as we continue in our discussion. So thanks again, Rod. Thanks again out to our honorary CHTMite. So guys, we're going to move on to our third presenter this morning. And I mentioned about smaller islands. So we are going on to, we've had Jamaica, we've had the Bahamas. So now we go on to a small island. And that's one of the Windward Islands. It is my pleasure now to introduce and welcome our third speaker, Sherry-Ann Adams, who is from Grenada. She graduated in 1991 with a bachelor's degree in tourism management. Her qualifications include now a PhD in responsible tourism management from Leeds Beckett University, an MSc in tourism management from Bournemouth University, and a postgrad certificate in environmental management for conservation and recreation from Sheffield Hallam University. She's a freelance tourism advisor, an adjunct professor with Cape Breton University, Nova Scotia, Canada, a fellow of the Cruise Research Society, and a published author in academic journals and books. Her contributions include cruise consumer behavior, the use of conjoint analysis to reduce social desirability response bias in research, and strategies to embrace the Caribbean's cruise recruitment and sustainable tourism labels, certifications for MSMEs. She began her early career in the hospitality sector at the Grenada 5-star Calabash Hotel. After graduating from CHTM, she worked as a marketing executive with the Grenada Board of Tourism, and later in senior management in Grenada with the regional hotel chain Rex Resorts. Her regional and international work experience includes the global cruise brand Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines, shipboard in the Pursers and Shore Excursions Department, All Leisure Group's Voyage of Discovery, Antarctica Expedition and Excursions Team, and the regional destination management company, St. Lucia Reps and Sunlink Tours. Sherry-Ann is best known in the Caribbean as the founder and former CEO of Tourism Services Limited, owner and operator of Adventure Tours in Grenada, an award-winning South Adventure Shore Excursions brand in her homeland, Grenada. She successfully positioned Destination Grenada in the Adventure Tours market for stayover and cruise ship guests. She also served as a non-executive director with the Grenada Hotel and Tourism Association, the T.A. Mary Shaw Community College, and the Grenada Board of Tourism. She chaired the Product Development Committee of the GDP and spearheaded the planning, design, and delivery of several social marketing, cause promotion, and environmental stewardship projects under the auspices of the Grenada Hotel and Tourism Association. She's now relocated in the UK in 2006 and spends much of her time with her husband shipboard in Asia and managing the personal, responsible, and carbon neutral lifestyle project. So I'm going to say good afternoon to Sherry-Ann because she's been way up ahead of us. So welcome Sherry-Ann Adams to our presentation this afternoon for you.
Yes, this afternoon. Thank you so much. It's really great to have the opportunity to catch up with everybody. It's really been so long and so much has happened in all our lives. And yeah, it's just really, really lovely to be here. It's, you know, I'm following in some big shoes I had in the previous two presentations. And yeah, I know we're looking at the time. I can see you're looking at the interest of time as well. So I'm going to get on with it. Keith, I'm going to share my screen. And I'm actually going to take a different angle with my presentation, in that I'm going to say to everybody, relax, sit back. I'm going to do what I do best. I'm going to tell you a story. So I'm going to go ahead and start, if that's okay with you, Lorraine?
Yes.
Okay. So we're all consumers of travel and tourism products and services. This is not only our careers, our livelihoods, it's the hospitality, leisure, and recreation we engage in during our relaxation time. Several times a day, we are faced with the ongoing realities of climate change and action. And action is needed now. It is that recording on loop, playing on the media, all types of media, and close to home. When you step outside and you feel that change in the climate, the Caribbean is getting hotter each year. UK and Canada winters are getting milder, and the summers are absolutely delightful, like being in the Caribbean, I dare say. We are told time and time again by scientists that there has to be global behavioral change. And I believe that global behavioral change starts with individual behavioral change. And yes, the behavioral changes have started, but we know considerably more needs to be done. So here is the question. Just adjust, sorry. Oops, going on here. All right, just bear with me, sorry. So here is the question that we are each faced with. How do you, as an individual, balance a high carbon emission travel and tourism lifestyle with being responsible and lowering your carbon footprint? In 2016, I had an epiphany. It was the year that I realized, in essence, I was a big hypocrite. Practice what you preach, the words I try and live by. But here I was with a doctorate and a string load of qualifications to my name, an advocate for responsible tourism. Yes, I was involved in helping companies, corporations, including cruise lines and SMEs alike, make changes starting with taking responsibility for sustainability. But equally, over the preceding years, I traveled to numerous conferences, trade shows, and the like all over the world. And by then had visited all 7 continents of the globe, including Antarctica. So here's my story about living a responsible and carbon neutral or carbon compensating lifestyle. That day in 2016, I took stock of myself and had a thorough self-examination. Financially, we had £40,000 in a savings account in the bank, earning less than 0.5% in interest. Not much money, but the reality was that the bank was making money while we weren't. There were other high yield options, but all came with penalties for early withdrawal. I was down to traveling 7 flights a year and 24 cruises. Andrew, my husband, was based shipboard in Asia, and we lived at our home here in Southampton in a very small, extremely modest apartment on Caribbean island context, but in an English context, prime marina location in a country of 60 million people. We had a Land Rover Discovery, and on all accounts, along with my doctorate, it was a story any Caribbean parent would be proud to talk about. Maybe it was because I was turning 50 the following year, I felt I needed to do something different. My friends were marking their 50th by taking trips of a lifetime to exotic and far-flung destinations, buying or changing their cars to Mercedes convertibles, BMWs, even having a bit of plastic surgery. whatever they fancy to celebrate their 50th birthday milestone. I named my project 50 by 50. In our daily life, we are already doing the 3 R's of recycling. We use energy efficient light bulbs, refusing plastic bags for shopping, doing the little things. When I traveled, I used to tick the box, paid a small fee to offset, donate to companies' chosen programs. But honestly, I'm not a fan. In my opinion, too much of the money goes to administration and not to the grassroots of the cause. But nevertheless, I gave my financial support to those and other initiatives. I felt it wasn't enough. I needed to do more as an individual. I also had to face the reality that I couldn't fly or cruise less if I wanted to keep my marriage. Grounding myself to a full-time land-based job wasn't a viable option. I did calculations using 3 different carbon footprint calculation tools for result comparison, and I had a very rude awakening. 7 flights a year, 24 cruises, my home footprint, including in the UK, the use of the car, all total approximately 45 metric tons of carbon emissions per year, just for me. Let me put this in perspective, the scientific facts. In the UK, a person on average accounts for 8.34 metric tons of carbon per year. In the USA, 16 metric tons per person per year, one of the highest in the world. The scientists have told us that we must not use over 2.5 metric tons per year if we're to stop climate change. What could I do that would really compensate and justify my existence on planet Earth? I had to do more. I truly needed to be a custodian of the planet. So I decided that I would do just that. I would invest in protecting the planet's lungs. After some thought and much research, I decided on Canada. Research from their forestry and parks authorities indicated that on average, the forest absorbs 7 metric tons of carbon per year. So if I purchase 50 acres of forest land in Canada, in honor, of course, of my 50 years on the planet, I could have a personal carbon sink of 350 metric tons of carbon per year. So after much research, searching, and a trip to Cape Breton Island in Nova Scotia, that's another story in itself. Another time, maybe for my biography. I found 64 acres of land with lake frontage and approximately 1 acre of wetlands included. Remember that 40,000 I mentioned earlier? Well, my dad always told me, put money, invest in land. Land appreciates, you can't go wrong. That year, end of 2016, a few months before he died in early 2017, I finally took my father's advice. Sorry, always get a little emotional there. We bought 64 acres, 50 of which have been designated as mine and Andrew's personal carbon sink. That's our pledge, 50 acres to remain protected by us and intact. We are custodians, and our plan is to pass it on when we die to our nieces and godchildren to continue the legacy as custodians of the 50-acre carbon sink. We didn't stop there. We sold the Land Rover Discovery, didn't replace a vehicle. After all, UK public transport network is more than efficient for our personal needs. We practiced the 8 R's of recycling instead of the 3 R's. I became a pescatarian, and to be honest, it's easier than I expected. I really don't miss meat. 4 years on, and it's now 2020. And like everyone else, planet Earth is getting a rest from us humans and rejuvenating, but it's a double-edged sword. And heartfully, it's painful to many. I haven't traveled since January, but I know our 50 acres is at work absorbing the carbon from the unfortunate fires in California, evidenced by the many blood red sunset photos shared by my neighbors in Cape Breton Island. So why this story and not a more conventional lecture about what responsible and sustainable tourism and exactly what carbon neutral lifestyles are? This story is not intended as a best practice example. It's one person's story, a story of a person who isn't a billionaire, a celebrity, royalty, or the like. I'm a CHTMite amidst my fellow graduates with one common interest: the global travel and tourism industry. And I believe that we are all pieces of a huge puzzle. Each individual lifestyle action plan is vital. Stop, think, calculate your carbon footprint, and set out your plan of action if you haven't already done so. Plant more trees in your backyard. Fruit trees work. Don't litter, put cigarettes in the bin. Use the 8 hours of recycling, step up from the 3 hours. Whatever you're already doing as an individual to reduce or offset your carbon footprint, keep doing it. But like myself, look for more opportunities to make those positive behavioral changes and implement them. I'm going to leave you with the words from the Persian poet Rumi. Yesterday I was clever, so I wanted to change the world. Today I'm wise, so I'm changing myself. Just a little story, food for thought. No, it's something different. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sherry Ann. And what an inspiration this morning. I think it was Maria who said earlier that some of us are in various decades of our lives. Some of us are in our 40s, our 50s, and our 60s. And at this point, I guess we're not allowed, we could say whatever we want about our age, but I can identify with you since I'm at that decade as well, close to that decade. So full disclosure.
We're all getting there.
So, and, you know, I noticed that you mentioned the 50 acres, and how many of us really thought of something as simple as a give back, as simple as a responsibility, as our contribution to global tourism, to establishing our carbon footprint story and our journey. And I would like to leave it here because I know there will be lots and lots of discussion about those three presentations. So again, Sherry Ann, thank you for this inspiration. I'm sure everybody on here this morning is thinking, wow, probably, I think you even put some guilt in us this morning just to sharing that remarkable story with us.
Just to say, we all have to face the reality. I would just like to point out that from an academic perspective, I was involved in several discussions last year, just before lockdown. And a lot of the academics here were coming to terms with the fact that in academia, we have one of the highest carbon footprints because we travel to so many conferences. So just something that we all need to calculate and think of.
Excellent. Thank you again. And I know where's our tech team in the background? I would like to be a little bit non-conventional and just, if we can all wave to acknowledge such great presentations that we had this morning from our colleagues. Just if you can just wave your hands, just to wave your hand to acknowledge to start off with Benny. Benny, Benny, this was excellent. Benny, wave up. Yeah. Rod, wave at Rod. Excellent presentation. And Sherian, excellent presentation. Thank you again, guys. So I think we are doing very good with time. So we would like to now start the discussions. And I would like to start off with my opening to all our panelists. And we're going to start off with Benny. And Benny, I note that one of the challenges that you mentioned is that we look at product development as package, as hotel development, just hotel development. So that struck me as not just being as a practitioner in tourism development, but also I know that there are many destinations represented here who clearly agree with you that we need to re-examine. So I would like to ask Benny, if you were to look at tourism as the future, what do you think? Give us a package, give us a picture of what your new tourism design would look like. What do you think? Just based on, you've offered us some great perspective this morning. Where you looked at the product, you looked at entertainment, you looked at food, culinary. If you could just give us a little further insights. If you had an image to share with us, I saw you had Bob Marley on screen. What do you think the future tourism destination would look like?
Sorry, Betty, just before you answer that, don't forget the question. If I could ask all three contributors, Eric, Benny, and Sherian, please keep your videos on at this time for the Q&A. Thank you. You're on, Benny.
Thank you. And I think that's an interesting question that I perhaps need to reference both Eric and Cherie before I attempt to respond to it. Both really beautifully reminded us of the symbiotic relationship between nature, between the environment and tourism. So we can appreciate that if we continue on current trajectory, it's not going to be too long before the reality of climate change, global warming, whichever label we want to slap on it, becomes very, very real for us. So as I envision the future of Caribbean tourism, I envision a Caribbean tourism, and let me start with what is going to be most basic. I envision a Caribbean tourism product that in the first instance is going to restrict the further expansion of all-inclusives. And that one for me is very personal because, again, of the value benefits or value added from that. In so saying, it means that we're going to emphasize and empower greater local ownership of the product, and that includes the accommodation sector. It also means that we're adding value by prioritizing niche over mass tourism. And I know these are very cliche terms, but I would be repackaging Caribbean tourism in a way that allows us to invite visitors into our lives. And if we're looking at current trends in tourism, we will recognize that people are looking for localized experiences. They're looking for authentic experiences. They're looking for the Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter moments. Those experiences that are so unique and customized to their personal needs that they can post about the fabulous experiences that they have had. So if I were to rethink Caribbean tourism today, I would really encourage all of us to look at ourselves, look at what it is that defines and differentiates us from the rest of the world, look at therefore how we can repackage without changing who we are at core, basically inviting people into our homes, into our destination. And again, the challenge here is we don't seem to have a lot of demonstrable pride about who we are. So in developing this new product, co-creation becomes a crucial part of that collaboration. So it's not just the public and private sector anymore. I think I saw a comment from Dr. Crick earlier. It's also about the extent to which we're going to engage communities in a very, very meaningful way. So we can start building out packages that see regular community members being able to benefit in a real and meaningful way without changing the essence of who they are. That's a mouthful.
Thank you, Benny. And Rod, would you like to add to this, please? You're muted, Rod.
No, I mean, just I endorse what Benny's saying. You know, I really enjoyed both presentations, and I think they fit really tied in with what we're trying to achieve, which is to, I mean, get people to understand the importance of the environment, but also whether they are personal actions or whether we are in a position of influence. As an example, you know, one of our own is now, you know, the president of, you know, Clifton, recently elevated to the presidency of that association. He has now such an opportunity to influence not only tourism development, but also, you know, hopefully because of knowledge and awareness that he would have, also able then to influence towards, again, and we're not trying to turn all of our countries and our properties into little nature tourism hotels. Absolutely, they have an important niche, but generally just understanding how important underpinning everything we do in the region, with the fact that we need to protect the natural environment. Because if we protect the environment will provide all of the tourism benefits and all of the benefits we need to survive as a people.
Thank you, Rod. And Sherry Ann? You're muted.
I would just like to, you know, pretty much say that Rod, Benny, what they've said as well, spot on. But I'm going to touch on one of the big elephants in the room for the Caribbean, the cruise ship sector. I mean, that's a great part of my life. My husband works on cruise ships. I spend an enormous amount of time with him there as well. And you know, the cruise ship sector, as you know, has been hit hard. But the ones that have been hit hardest are the ones that are going on, then it's really a lot of the smaller companies. Benny mentioned about all-inclusives, you know, we're talking about large, Rod was saying, you know, we're not looking for everything to be small. The point is, we're all part of a big puzzle. Cruise ship industry is here to stay. Those large hotels are here to stay. Everybody has a part to play. And, you know, as hard as what is happening with us with COVID is, a lot of the ships that are being taken to the scrapyard would have cost really too much money to get up to specs, to environmental specs. And what we're going to have instead is a lot of newer ships with better technology coming out. And that's going to be better for us in the long run. And as small islands, we now have to, and islands in the Caribbean in general, we have to now think of how we're going to embrace this. Are we then going to have a lot more tours, smaller tours? How are we going to do things, especially if it's going to be larger numbers coming on? So, you know, just to wrap up and say, really and truly, we're not getting rid of any sector within tourism. What we have to think of is how we're going to make everything better and more efficient.
Great. Thank you, guys. I know we got a question about technology, but I know our next session covers a lot of technology. So I would, can we hold that question for next session? Karen and Keith, do you agree with me, or should we take it right now? I think we should take it for the next session. So,
yes, Lorraine, session number 3 is about technology in the hospitality industry. So those presenters may be more equipped to answer that.
Okay, so, okay, guys, I wanted to just pose another a question of our panelists. And I know again, this is such, like we say in the US, such breaking news presentations this morning, because it hits us to the core. And I wanted to look at, let us look at ourselves as graduates. And I think this is really part of sustainability in education. And I know we have the chancellor, we have some professors on, so on. So I'm going to ask a off the cuff question here. How can, because we are 25 years, 30 years later, introducing all those relevant topics, all of the relevant issues on sustainability and product development. How can you, as your individual professionals, integrate all of those issues into the current curriculum of the CHTM? Because last night, again, we saw that they were, in one of our groups, we had about 30 of our participants, and I hasten to say that maybe about 15 of them mentioned to us that they would not be at the session this morning. Why? Because they thought that, first of all, they were not involved in tourism anymore. And second, that the issues or the discussions were irrelevant to them. So they thought they would just miss the sessions and join us in the evening at the Lime, you know, as we meet back on the, either the country Lime or the destination Lime. So how can, especially as we have all our professors and our the chancellor on the webinar this morning, how can all of those issues be integrated into the curriculum so we can ensure that when we spit out our graduates next year, the year after, that there is enough relevance in what they bring to the table for their individual corporations or businesses? So I'd like to start off with Rod, since you may have to hire one of them. How about you, Rod?
So I would say that I think the university has an opportunity to be, you know, and again, I will apologize because I haven't kept up with all the curriculum, but certainly our university needs to be a center of excellence for sustainable tourism, sustainable development. And then there are so many opportunities with this COVID-19. The positive aspect of this, if it is that it certainly taught us how effective really interacting by distance and remotely, virtually, it can be. And so we have the opportunity to share so many experiences of not only professionals like engineers, etc., but to touch people like fishermen who have powerful stories. In my work, most of my education comes from talking to people on the ground and fishermen and learning from them and farmers, etc. So the university, if it doesn't, should have really powerful elements in our curriculum of sustainable tourism. You know, there definitely should be a sustainable tourism track based, you know, with in our engineering programs. We should be thinking about thinking about ensuring that we have climate smart construction and design, you know, built into what our engineers are doing. But for certainly the tourism curriculum and for CHTM, a clear track on nature, you know, national parks, you know, climate smart planning. All of the elements of sustainable tourism need to be built into our programs. And we need to make sure that there's no confusion, because I've been a part of curriculum development before, and even in talking with officials from the Ministry of Tourism, they sometimes think that we're coming as environmentalists to change the complete paradigm. As Cherry Ann said, they think we're coming to get rid of cruise ships. They think we're looking to get rid of the large developments. That's not it. Those of us in this field, we want to be very much involved in the discussion, and our students coming out of our program should be equipped with the skills that understand that wherever they go, whether they're going to work on a cruise ship or whether they're going to work in a beautiful little resort in Toko, they are going to understand the principles of sustainable development, and whatever decision they make, whatever design they are part of, that it uses the opportunity to maximize sustainable design into that. So as Cherry Ann said, that cruise ship, it's there, it's large, it won't go away, it has a carbon footprint. But if we can teach our students to think about minimizing the carbon footprint, I think that's going to be really powerful. But the UE, the university, should be the center of excellence for sustainable design and climate smart reality. So, sorry, thank you.
Excellent, excellent. Over to Sherry, I'm sorry.
Yep, exactly everything Rod said, and I mean, spot on as usual. But there's the other side to it with technology. I mean, here we are using Zoom, okay? I really can't tell you exactly where the curriculum is at CHTM, but my storytelling, the storytelling of the fishermen, all these, wonderful, wonderful examples we can bring into the classroom to the students using virtual technology. So that can be incorporated. Because of time, I didn't get into more in the story. We actually have a second phase to what we're doing over there. We're 64 acres of land, 50 is in a carbon sink. That 14 acres we have plans for. I have an old school bus that's on the property. It came with it. The previous owner used to camp out there. It's going to be a wildlife hide. And part of the plan is to have cameras there that's going to be monitoring the ecology. That link is something I'll be happy to share with CHTM when I have it up and running. We all have things that we can bring to the table to the students to give them firsthand experience. And finally, there are other skills that they need besides what they're learning in the classroom. We're dealing with disasters every single day. First aid, it's something that's taught to the hospitality cohort. All students should be doing first aid in this day and age. Other life skills, how to forage, how to tie knots. These are things that they should be encouraged to go out and do when they're not in the university, in the classroom. And, all these things will help them. We deal with hurricanes and things will be getting worse. We have to face it. And it's just really preparing them for life skills, I think, is an important part.
Thank you, Sherry Ann. Benny?
Interestingly, I personally, given my experience with both major universities in Jamaica, I don't think the curriculum is as inflexible as it may seem. As a matter of fact, we've been quite adaptive to the changes. Where I would perhaps be most challenged is industry's readiness to accept our graduates with the sort of skill sets that they have. And it's in that vein that I think we ought to focus a bit more on the shifts that are taking place and thus encourage not just the focus that we now have on sustainable tourism, ecotourism, management of attractions, and the development of attractions, which will incorporate community tourism as well. But perhaps we also do need to get to the point where there's greater emphasis on new business venture and entrepreneurship. And as Cherie said, both the soft and technical skills that would also see us incorporating to a greater extent the technology. And I think the technological changes too are a bit worrying for me in terms of our curriculum, because whether or not we want to acknowledge it, the vast number of our students are going to make their entry in industry, in the hotel sector. And at this point, with the smart shifts that are taking place, we do need to upskill and thus upgrade the programs to reflect a lot of the changes that are taking place technologically as well. But generally speaking, the curriculum tends to be sufficiently adaptive to respond to the changes that are taking place globally. Where we are having a challenge is with a product that is not responding to market realities and therefore less willing to adopt and include our students in the way that they would have expected to be included.
Very well said. I do think that okay, we're just checking a question here. This is excellent because my next question, just before,
Lorraine?
Yes?
Sorry, just want to interject for a second. Mr. Vincent Vanderpool Wallace, great supporter of the CHTM over 100 years, wanted to ask a couple questions.
Sure.
If he Right, if you could please turn on your video and mic.
Wow, a legend joins us.
A legend, exactly.
Excellent.
Come, Vince.
Hello.
If I can just turn on the mic, that would be great.
All right, go ahead.
No, I think I asked two questions, really, and one of the problems has always been, as far as I can tell, I mean, the Caribbean exists only at conferences and seminars. As soon as everybody goes back home, it's everybody to himself and God for us all. And there's no question that if we got together as a regional body in a number of initiatives, we'd be far more successful. The classic one right now is the current state of confusion about what the requirements are for travel into the Caribbean. It's so much all over the board that I'm convinced there are lots of people out there who choose to go someplace else because we have yet to come up with a single set of protocols that applies to the entire region. So I'm trying to understand some of the things that CHTM might be able to do in affecting this much more cohesive Caribbean that we keep talking about, but we talk about it at the conference, but it doesn't seem to continue on when we get away from conference. That's question number one. Question number two has to do with headcount tourism. We've been trying to wean ourselves of this for a very, very long period of time. The difficulty is we have so trained our populations to believe that that is the measure of tourism, that anybody who tries to move away from it, you can only do it when things are booming, because as soon as you begin to move away from it, people say you're trying to hide something. And so if we ever get back to the time when things are booming, and by the way, some part of mass tourism is very important because no matter how sophisticated the offer is, people who are in the transportation business, their business relate to mass tourism. People who are in the food business, a restaurant, whatever, you need a lot more people coming through. So, but can CHTM be involved in an exercise to try and create some new measures of tourism that's much more reflective of what the panelists were talking about this morning, and begin to have that embedded in what we are doing across the region and get that far more acceptable? If you try to get it from a politician, you're going to get the kind of pushback. If you get something from an institution like UWI or from yourselves, I think talking about it on a broader level is likely to be much more acceptable. So they're the two issues that I'd like comments on.
Thank you, Vincent. Thank you, Honorable Vincent Vanderpool. So I just checked with our tech persons and we don't have much time left. So very quickly, if we can have a quick response, starting with Sherianne. You're muted, Sherianne.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm out here in the UK. I would love to come back to the Caribbean, but you know, going to Grenada, it means I have to go into quarantine for 2 weeks before I could get out. Yes, it's the same, exactly what you're saying. We need the Caribbean to come together and give some common guidelines for the visitors coming in. However, we know so little about COVID. I know more about it because I had it in December when I was in China, before we even had the announcement from China as to what it was, okay? It's not something that's easy to deal with, and my lungs are not the same since. So just because of that, I caution that maybe it is better that things are handled on an individual island basis at this time. Because if you have the same guidelines straight across the board for the entire Caribbean, it is going to vary from island to island as to how they're being impacted by COVID. So just food for thought there at this time based on how little we know about it.
Rod?
Yeah, I think I understand the point Vince is making, because I've tried to track what's happening across the region, and I understand what Cherie is saying as well, Sherianne is saying as well, but I think if we can come up with an approach that we can market to the world, because it is tied to as he says, we go to these conferences, we're all Kumbaya, Caribbean, blah, 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 etc. We leave and we're all individualistic. And I think there is an opportunity to promote a oneness approach, and it doesn't mean we have to compromise national standards or sovereignty, because it's still your ministers of health who would guide what happens. But I think there is an opportunity to send a message that the Caribbean is looking at what we should do about this disease or this pandemic, and that we are approaching it as a region. I think there's some credibility there. With respect to the other points, yeah, I certainly endorse what Vincent was saying. And also, yeah, don't let's only look at the politicians. I love working with politicians, and we have to work with our politicians, but there's so many opportunities to engage so many other people to be part of the decision making. Thank you, Vince, for joining us.
Thank you. We, at this point, our next session starts at 11 o'clock, and we've just been told that we are really, really pressed for time. This is not an end to the discussion. This is a beginning of a wonderful discussion, folks. And if I could borrow back from the Chancellor's remarks, cooperation and collaboration. So it looks like we need a second reunion, Karen. I mean, this is so excellent. Our first session, we have such great content. Just note that all of those speeches, all of the presentations will become available to everyone once our Master Tech, Mr. Keith, has wrapped up everything for us. So I would like to, I don't think we have much time for any more questions. So I would just want to wrap up really quickly and say, coming out of all this great discussion and comments from our over, I think we had about 80 persons on there today. We have to look at policy, we have to rethink, and we have to look at our product, we have to look at cooperation, collaboration, and put all of those together. And I think more critically, as someone who's actually in a generating market for the Caribbean, we have to be very cognizant of the new tourism product, how we pivot and how we take that product to market, because that would be very critical. So it makes no sense if we talk about sustainable tourism. I mean, one, of course, we have to integrate for our communities where we're from, but we have to be also cognizant if we want to make it beneficial and something that is economic, because that's what we face as well. We have to be cognizant of how we take that new tourism product, that sustainable product, off to our generated markets to help our citizenry in the entire Caribbean. So I would like to close off and say thank you to the organizing team. Thank you to the coordinating team. Thank you everyone who came on to listen this morning. We are here, we will be back for the general sessions in the evening. We can lime, this time we can have our, whatever, I think Kevin had Chairman's rum last night. We could have anything we want. I'm going to bring my wine tonight. We're going to relax. And thank you again. Thank you. It was a pleasure to be with you this morning. And over to our coordinator, Karen. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Lorraine. And thank you to all our contributors this morning. Thank you so much.